The Raphael family arrives at the mansion late in the evening. Stella Raphael finds a bottle of champagne in the fridge, pours herself a glass and steps outside to explore her new property. She discovers a greenhouse that clearly needs repair. At that moment her husband approaches to wish her a good night. They have a busy day ahead of them tomorrow. Max Raphael is the new chief physician of the local psychiatric hospital. At the welcome party, he and his family are greeted by all the future colleagues. After the official greetings, Dr. Peter Cleve joins the gathering and immediately approaches Stella to say hello. Peter has worked at the hospital longer than anyone else and handles the most challenging cases. Peter is not married, as he considers love to be a dangerous thing. Stella disagrees, pointing out that she has been married for 12 years. But Peter corrects her, for he is not talking about marriage but about passion. Right after the party ends, Max asks his wife about her conversation with Peter Cleve, who aspired to be chief physician but the job went to Max. Stella promises to build relationships with the other doctors' wives during their morning coffee meetings. At the first meeting, the women tackle truly serious issues. There is a lack of slow dances at the annual hospital ball, and they need to choose someone to help with the fruitcake. Stella is selected, a sort of test for the new member of the group. When the meeting finally ends, Stella decides to walk around the hospital building. She hears cries for help and follows the sounds, seeing nurses leading away a screaming patient. Suddenly an elderly smiling woman touches Stella's hand and asks if she is going to join them. Stella declines and quickly decides to leave that part of the hospital, but she runs into Dr. Cleve. The man escorts Stella out of the building and advises her not to enter the treatment ward again, as you never know what might await inside. Stella is bored in the new house and offers her help to the housekeeper but is refused. Stella asks the woman how the previous owner of the house spent her days. The housekeeper smiles and replies that the former owner used to make tapestries. Stella finds an activity she enjoys. She actively participates in arranging the grounds around the house. While she is planting shrubs, her son Charlie suggests that she come and see what he and his new friend Edgar, who is responsible for repairing the greenhouse, have come up with. They have invented a way to measure a person's strength. Suddenly a policeman approaches and demands that Edgar stop his dangerous actions. Then the policeman notices Stella and apologizes, not expecting her to be looking after her son. At dinner, Stella tells her husband that Charlie has made friends with the guy who is repairing the greenhouse. Is this friendship safe? It turns out that Edgar is a patient at the psychiatric hospital. Max explains that work is a privilege for patients who have shown good behavior for several years. Stella wonders why Dr. Cleve considers this patient his favorite. The husband mentions that Edgar used to be a sculptor and that Cleve fancies himself an aesthete. The next day Stella approaches Edgar, who is busily working on their greenhouse, and apologizes for yesterday's incident. They start a conversation. Dr. Cleve overhears them. Edgar reveals to Stella the reason he is in the hospital, his wife's infidelity, for which she paid with her life. Stella is doing housework when Edgar suddenly brings in Charlie with bruises and calls for Mrs. Raphael. It turns out that the boy had climbed a tree and fallen. Later, Edgar asks Stella how her son is feeling. Stella hopes that the incident will deter the child from climbing trees. Edgar doubts it, as the boy clearly has a thirst for adventure. Stella and Max Raphael head to the annual hospital ball. Everyone is having a good time. Edgar invites Stella to dance. Stella doesn't like it too much, but she agrees out of politeness. During the dance, there's a clear spark between them, which they are forced to suppress. After the ball, Max Raphael, in high spirits, shares a secret with his wife that he learned at the ball. The director of the psychiatric hospital plans to retire next year, and Max feels that he is likely to get the position. The next morning Edgar approaches Stella, who is relaxing, and hands her flowers as a thank you for the dance at the ball. However, Stella refuses to accept them, to which Edgar places the bouquet at her feet. From the house window, Stella watches Edgar playing with Charlie. At that moment, Stella makes an important decision that will change her life forever. Noticeably nervous, Stella puts on a beautiful dress, primps herself and heads to the greenhouse where Edgar is working. She doesn't say a word to the man, but he understands everything. Passion arises between them. Thus begins their affair. Secret meetings with Edgar make Stella happy. They constantly risk being caught, but they both enjoy it. During a session, Dr. Cleve asks Edgar if he likes Mrs. Raphael, to which Edgar lies that he doesn't see her often. Edgar wants to be discharged from the clinic, but Dr. Cleve tells him that the treatment is not yet complete. After leaving the doctor's office, Edgar allows himself to be a bit angry. The man is convinced that he has already gotten rid of his pathological jealousy. Brenda, Max's mother, comes to visit the Raphael family. At dinner, where family members, friends and close colleagues have gathered, everyone compliments the new greenhouse. Max admits that Edgar has worked a miracle. The guests begin discussing Edgar's life story and illness. Suddenly Stella proposes a toast, to drink to the doors being locked and the keys being thrown away. Everyone instantly falls silent. After dinner, Raphael scolds his wife for her behavior. But Stella argues back, saying it's unacceptable to so easily deprive someone of a future. These words anger Max even more. He gets into the car to take his mother home, and Charlie decides that he wants to accompany the grandmother as well. They don't know that someone is watching them closely from the greenhouse. Edgar sees that no one is home except for Stella. He secretly slips into the house and heads straight for her. Brenda suddenly remembers that she left her checkbook in the son's house. Fortunately, Edgar manages to hide. While Stella is distracted by Brenda, Edgar steals Max's money and his suit, then quietly sneaks past the women and down to the exit. But Charlie enters the house. No one says a word. In the car, Brenda notices that Charlie has suddenly gone silent. The boy tells the grandmother that he just saw a patient in the house, coming out of his mom's bedroom. Brenda abruptly stops the car. At that moment, Edgar climbs out of the trunk. This is how he managed to escape the psychiatric hospital. Meanwhile, Stella is looking for Edgar in the greenhouse, but he is not there. The hospital director has heard rumors that Stella's relationship with patient Edgar Stark has crossed the line of propriety. After the Raphael family leaves, the director calls in the other doctors and states that judging by Stella's reaction, the rumors about the affair are true. The director is upset by what has happened and very angry. Now the Raphael family is obligated to leave. But Dr. Cleve suggests to the director that they reconsider. Perhaps Stella was simply a victim of Edgar's manipulation. Later, Mr. Raphael summons Dr. Cleve and reprimands him for allowing Edgar to work, despite knowing about his unstable mental state. Charlie asks his mother what will happen to Edgar if he gets caught. Stella is restless. In one such moment, Dr. Cleve approaches her and offers his help. She silently walks away. At a family dinner, Stella announces that she wants to go to London for Christmas shopping. But the real reason for her trip is a meeting. Some time ago she received a call from someone named Nick, who knows Edgar. He takes her to an abandoned building where she is met by Edgar, who apologizes for not contacting her sooner. It was too dangerous. Returning home, Stella tells her husband that she will need to repeat the trip next week. Meeting Edgar revives Stella's love for life. But upon returning home, Max asks his wife where all the purchases she made are. There was an argument between them. He can no longer trust her. Time and again Stella finds reasons to go to London. Edgar gives her an ultimatum, her family or him. But making a decision is not easy. In one of these moments Dr. Cleve approached Stella and asked how Edgar was doing. Stella denied continuing any communication with Edgar. The doctor told her what happened to Edgar's wife. The man not only took her life but did so with extreme cruelty. However, this does not scare Stella. Returning home, she packs her things, takes one last look at her son, who is doing his homework, and rushes off to Edgar. That evening, Max doesn't know how to explain to the child that his mother has disappeared. But the boy already knows everything. Meanwhile, Stella and Edgar are having a great time. Edgar has returned to sculpting and in a fit of inspiration, often ignores Stella. In one of these moments, she decides to take a walk and notices Edgar's friend Nick watching her. She yells at Edgar, claiming that he is no different from her husband. At the Christmas celebration under the influence of alcohol, Stella can't hold back and cries on Edgar's shoulder. The separation from the son is very difficult for her. After the celebration, Nick, left alone with Stella, confesses his love to her. He knows that Stella doesn't care about his feelings at all. The next day Nick moves out. Stella asks him to stay, but Nick has already made up his mind. He suggests that Stella run away with him because Edgar is mentally ill. Stella is truly afraid of Edgar, but loves him no matter what. One day Stella goes to the market for groceries and meets Nick there, asking him to find a doctor for Edgar. They do not suspect that Edgar is watching them. When Stella returned home, Edgar lashed out at her, accusing of infidelity. The police were looking for Stella, and one of the detectives was lucky to catch her. And Stella was fortunate to be caught. Edgar watched as she was put into a car by people in uniform. In prison, Max visited his wife. The only thing Stella asked him for was to see her son. The police and Dr. Cleve searched the buildings near the place where Stella was captured and found Edgar's hideout. Dr. Cleve carefully examined the sculptures and paintings. He took a small bust of Stella with him. Max was driving Stella to see their son. The journey was long, all the way to Wales. After Stella's escapade became public knowledge, the life of the Raphael family changed drastically. Max was immediately fired but found a position at a local hospital. Dr. Cleve became the new director. By the time Stella arrived, Charlie was already asleep. She woke her son up, promising never to leave him again. Stella walked the son to school. And when the house was empty, she drank heavily. One day Max told her that they couldn't continue living like this. He asked Stella to return to them. A call came into the psychiatric hospital. The caller introduced himself as a colleague of Dr. Raphael's and inquired about where the doctor was currently living. The woman who answered the call could only provide the new place of work. When Dr. Cleve took the phone from her, the call stopped. Apparently it was Edgar. Max had to call the police to at least keep himself and his family safe. At home, Stella heeded Max's words. She picked Charlie up from school, having prepared a delicious lunch for him in advance. But she didn't sit down to eat with him. Instead, she painted the walls of the room. Stella was yearning for change. Edgar was following Stella's trail. He was obsessed with her. But Stella couldn't forget him either. They managed to secretly meet in a ruined building. Edgar once again asked Stella to run away with him, but this time he suggested they take Charlie with them. Suddenly Edgar noticed the police. They were being watched. Edgar made a run for it, but it was too late. Max knew this would happen, but he couldn't help being angry with his wife. Charlie and Stella went on a field trip with the rest of the classmates and their parents. Stella sat on a rock and became lost in her thoughts while Charlie waded into the water to fish. At some point the boy fell, but Stella didn't immediately react, being in a detached state. A passing teacher saw everything and rushed to help the boy. Snapping out of it, Stella also ran to help, but it was too late. The demise of their son marked the end of Max and Stella Raphael's family history. At the funeral, Max couldn't hold back his tears. He hated his wife, saying that she would have to live with this for the rest of her days. Stella was placed in the psychiatric hospital. She was quiet and obedient, following all the instructions of the medical staff. She often called out for the son, blaming herself for everything. Before her mind became clouded by the powerful medication, Stella asked where Edgar was. Dr. Cleve responded that Edgar was not here. However, after visiting Stella, Dr. Cleve went to see his favorite patient, Edgar. He was in isolation and showed no reaction. Later, Dr. Cleve spoke with Stella, trying to understand if she had truly lost all feelings for Edgar after Charlie's demise. To find out for sure, Dr. Cleve revealed to both his patients that they were very close to each other. Dr. Cleve visited Max. Dr. Raphael had decided to end his career as a doctor and try his hand at teaching. But Max understood that Dr. Cleve was not here for a heart-to-heart talk. The next morning, Dr. Cleve called Stella into his office and told her about his conversation with Max. Stella could be released from the hospital if the doctor could guarantee her continued treatment and safety. In other words, if Stella agreed to live with Dr. Cleve in his home. Max is ready to file for divorce. Dr. Cleve offered Stella a good home and a decent life. He had no illusions that Stella would ever love him, but for now, he was her only hope. Dr. Cleve immediately informed Edgar of Stella's agreement. But he only smiled in response. Peter Cleve gave Stella a ring. It was his mother's ring. All the women were discussing the upcoming annual hospital ball. Dr. Cleve asked if Stella would like to attend. Stella asked if Edgar would be there, revealing to Peter that she suspected his plan. But the doctor replied that he hadn't mentioned it because he didn't want to upset her. Edgar thought the doctor's plan was doomed. In his opinion, no one could handle Stella. At the ball, Stella carefully scanned the guests, looking for Edgar with her eyes. But he was released last. Dr. Cleve watched the scene closely. Finally Edgar entered the hall. Stella walked toward him, and he toward her. At some point she lost sight of him, and Dr. Cleve asked her to dance. During the dance, he told her that Edgar had refused to attend the ball, preferring sleep instead. Meanwhile in isolation, Edgar wept as he heard the music. After the ball, Stella threw away Dr. Cleve's ring, went to the top of the tower and took a step down. She was buried next to her son. But she remained in her husband's memory and as the bust on Dr. Cleve's desk. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.